Her name was Elizabeth, a Christian billionaire renowned for her brilliance, business prowess, and international influence. Born into a prestigious family, raised amidst luxury, she had become the embodiment of modern success. Her life was a dream for many: properties across the globe, a multinational empire, and power that inspired admiration and envy. Yet deep within, Elizabeth harbored a void that never left her. Behind the diplomatic smile and billion-dollar meetings, a restlessness echoed, "Is this enough? What's the point of it all if my heart is never at peace?" It happened at a grand international charity gala. Thousands of guests adorned in luxury attire toasted with the finest wine while an orchestra performed a majestic symphony. Amidst the splendor, Elizabeth suddenly collapsed. Panic spread through the crowd. In the chaos, a calm-faced man in a black suit stepped forward. Dr. Amir, a Muslim doctor attending as one of the guest speakers. With composed precision, Amir administered first aid. An ambulance soon arrived and rushed Elizabeth to the hospital. But one moment stayed with her. The stranger gently held her hand and said, "You'll be all right. God is with you." Days later, Elizabeth contacted Amir to thank him. They met in a modest place far from the world she was used to. Amir neither admired wealth nor sought power. He spoke plainly, yet his words carried weight. He shared his faith about the oneness of God, about sincerity, and life as a test. Elizabeth listened at first with curiosity, then with deepening interest. "Why do you seem so at peace?" she asked. Amir simply smiled, "Because I believe in my purpose." From then on, their conversations became regular, lengthy discussions, deep questions, and sincere debates. Elizabeth began reading an English translation of the Qur'an. She found familiar names, Mary and Jesus, but told in a way that touched her soul. Elizabeth began to question the meaning of life, her creator, and her own identity. She slowly withdrew from the business spotlight and spent more time reflecting. She watched lectures, spoke with Muslim women, and even quietly visited places of worship previously foreign to her. One night, in complete silence, she prayed like never before with her heart fully open. "If you are truly there, and this is the right path, then show me your light," she whispered. And she felt it, not lightning or a loud voice, but a profound relief. A burden lifted. Her soul found a place to return to. Months later, Elizabeth made the biggest decision of her life. In a quiet, humble room, she uttered 2 sentences that changed everything. She embraced Islam. Tears of joy streamed down her face. She took the name Aliyah, meaning noble and exalted. Her conversion shocked many. Some praised her, others mocked. But Aliyah stood firm. She closed most of her business ventures and began a new mission, serving others. She founded humanitarian organizations, built schools and hospitals in impoverished regions, and funded education for children with no access. Aliyah and Amir, who had long been only thoughtful companions, eventually realized that destiny had written a deeper story. They married in a simple ceremony, witnessed by loved ones. No extravagant gala, just heartfelt prayers and peaceful smiles. Together, they lived as partners in faith, in social work, and in a shared journey of upholding values they both cherished. Aliyah's life stands as proof that truth can be discovered even by those born far from it. That light can reach anyone sincerely seeking it. And sometimes, guidance doesn't arrive through debates or lectures, but through one small act, a stranger's sincere help that brings light from the sky into a heart. Their marriage was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a greater journey. Aliyah and Amir continued on their respective paths, now united by the same spirit, devotion to God and service to humanity. After embracing Islam, Aliyah did not completely leave the business world. Instead, she now used it as a tool, not a goal. She founded a major foundation focused on empowering women, children, and marginalized communities. She redirected nearly all her profits to fund free schools, international scholarships, and vocational training centers. Aliyah believed that education was the key to change. She often visited remote villages, conflict zones, and impoverished cities not as a billionaire flanked by security forces, but as a fellow human being. She sat with mothers, listened to children's stories, and gave hope to women who had lost theirs. In one of her speeches, she said, "I once stood on top of the world with my body, but my heart was empty. Now I stand among the marginalized, and it is there that I truly found myself." Her foundation also opened safe houses for victims of violence, regardless of religion or background. She often said that Islam was not just a belief, but a call to action. Meanwhile, Amir continued his profession as a doctor, but on a much broader scale. He established a mobile medical organization that provided free services in conflict zones, refugee camps, and impoverished communities across the globe. He built a volunteer team of doctors, nurses, and non-medical personnel from various backgrounds. He believed that health was a basic human right, and that the knowledge he had must be used to heal, not merely to treat. Amir also actively participated in interfaith and intercultural seminars, showing how Islamic values align with humanitarian service and science. He became a bridge between modern medicine and deep spiritual meaning. In an interview, he once said, "We don't just inject medicine. We inject hope. Because when someone knows they're not alone, their body begins to fight back." Despite their busy lives, Aliyah and Amir always made time to design projects together. One of them was a trauma rehabilitation center for children affected by war. There, children could learn, play, and begin to heal emotionally in a loving environment. Aliyah managed the funding and administration, while Amir handled the psychosocial and medical programs. Together, they combined leadership and compassion, business and service, intellect and faith. Every weekend, they met with their team and shared field stories. Often, these gatherings were filled with laughter, tears, and warm embraces of family formed not by blood, but by a shared noble purpose. As with all lives, their journey was not always smooth. There was criticism, threats, even slander. Aliyah was shunned by parts of her old world. Amir often faced bureaucracy and violence in the field. But both remained steadfast, supporting one another. They did not respond with anger, but with sincerity and acts of service. Every night, they prayed together, reminding each other that this world is only a temporary stop. One rainy night, Aliyah said to Amir, "I used to think strength meant having everything. But true strength is when I can lose everything and still love God." Amir held her hand and replied, "And I'm grateful to witness that strength." Years passed. Aliyah and Amir's names became symbols of hope. They weren't known as celebrities, but as light-bearers. Across the world, the people they had helped grew into leaders of change within their own communities. Their books became sources of inspiration. Their talks went viral. But the most touching were handwritten letters from children saying, "Thank you for making us feel worthy. Thank you for teaching us that God never leaves us." Aliyah and Amir never sought fame, but they knew that sincere goodness spreads like light that cannot be contained. This is not a typical love story. It is a story of two souls who met through sincerity, worked in devotion, and walked together toward God. In a world often divided by differences, they proved that love, knowledge, and faith can unite to heal the world. In the 5th year of their journey in humanitarian and Dawah work, Aliyah and Amir faced one of their most difficult missions, helping victims of a severe humanitarian crisis in a conflict zone where media access was restricted and lives were reduced to statistics. Their team legally infiltrated through diplomatic channels, but conditions on the ground were far from safe. Homes were destroyed, children were orphaned, and medical facilities were extremely limited. Aliyah, who usually worked behind the scenes strategizing, was now on the front lines. One night, while monitoring logistics at a refugee camp, an explosion erupted. Chaos. Thick black smoke. People running. In the midst of the panic, Aliyah lost contact with Amir, who had been at the medical post. Panic set in. She prayed non-stop. She searched for him with silent tears, under the wailing of emergency sirens. At last, she found Amir bloody, but alive tending to a small child who was more severely wounded. "I couldn't leave him," Amir said weakly, pointing to the child. That moment carved both pain and profound admiration into Aliyah's heart. She realized, true love isn't about words, but about who chooses to keep fighting even when they themselves are nearly broken. Soon after returning, an international media outlet made serious allegations. Their foundation was accused of misusing funds and harboring a hidden agenda. A narrative was spun, videos were taken out of context, and some media painted Aliyah as the main target, a former billionaire Christian who had converted and was now seen as a threat to Western stability. The foundation's accounts were frozen. Major sponsors pulled out. Supporters began to doubt. Some volunteers quit under family pressure. Amir received death threats. Aliyah was officially summoned by the authorities. But in the face of these attacks, those they had helped came forward in their defense. Children they had sponsored wrote open letters. An independent journalist exposed the media's lies. And a former refugee, now a lawyer, offered to defend them pro bono. In the heart of the storm, Aliyah said to Amir, "If the world accuses us for the good we've done, then let Allah be our judge. We are merely His servants." Once cleared of all charges, support poured in stronger than ever. Their names gained recognition not through media power, but through truth that could not be silenced. Amir was appointed as a medical advisor to an international humanitarian organization. Aliyah was invited to speak at global forums on philanthropy reform and global justice. Yet, at the peak of their acclaim, they made a surprising decision, to leave all public roles and return to a simple life. They purchased a remote piece of land, built a center for underprivileged families, a self-sufficient organic farm, and a free Qur'an memorization school for orphans. They lived in a modest wooden house, with no servants and no excessive security. Every morning, they watered their plants. Every night, they taught children. And every day, they prayed side by side on the same prayer mat. The world lost them as public figures, but the Ummah gained them as teachers of life. Years later, Aliyah wrote her final letter, to be opened after her passing. "I once lived with everything, yet felt lost. And I once lived with nothing, yet felt an irreplaceable peace. Guidance isn't a light that falls from the sky, it is a lantern lit in the heart that seeks it." If you want to know what success truly is, don't look at who stands on the highest stage, but at who still bows down in prayer when the world tells them to rise. Today, the Qur'an center they built has graduated hundreds of students. Their small hospital still serves the poor free of charge. Their names live not on billboards, but in the silent prayers of orphans, struggling mothers, and souls touched by their journey. In the center's library hangs a simple wooden-framed photo. Aliyah and Amir smiling while holding a child's hand under a leafy tree, backlit by sunset. And beneath it reads, "This world is temporary. But kindness is a light that never fades." Several years after settling in their simple home, an unexpected event arrived, a global pandemic. The world was once again shaken by a health crisis threatening lives across the globe. Hospitals were overwhelmed, countries closed their borders, and uncertainty swept through everyone. Although Aliyah and Amir were far from the hustle and bustle of the big city, they couldn't stand still. They knew that, even though they weren't in the heart of the chaos, their role was more than just offering help. This great disaster required greater collaboration and sacrifice. They reached out to several humanitarian organizations they knew and began organizing medical aid, food, and vaccinations in remote areas and regions that were unreachable by international assistance. Amid the pandemic, Aliyah felt that this was a great test for both her and Amir. Over the years, they had dedicated their lives to helping those in need, but now the world was facing a challenge greater than anything they had ever encountered. Aliyah said to Amir, "This isn't just a test of physical health, Amir. It's a test for our hearts, for how we stay strong in the face of such a great trial." Amir, with his calm smile, replied, "We don't know what kind of test will come. But we know that every challenge will be an opportunity to draw closer to Allah." In the midst of the pandemic's difficulties, a major project knocked on their door, an initiative to build a large hospital and global research center that not only dealt with the medical crisis but also integrated ethics, humanity, and spirituality. This project required not only significant funding but also complex political and social relationships, as many countries and international institutions had differing interests. However, Aliyah and Amir knew that this was a rare opportunity to touch many lives. With conviction and courage, they began to plan. Aliyah, although no longer directly involved in the business world, had to face the world of calculations and politics once again. Meanwhile, Amir, with his integrity and medical sincerity, began to seek out a team of experts who were wholeheartedly committed and not driven by money or power. But they also had to face a heavy challenge: internal conflict within their foundation. Some of their team members began to feel that Aliyah and Amir's vision was too idealistic and unrealistic. Some volunteers criticized them for expecting too much from a world that would never change and being too naive in trusting a broken system. Aliyah faced this with incredible patience, speaking with each of them individually, reminding them that great change often starts with small steps, and good intentions must be followed by determination. Amir was always by her side, accompanying her in every meeting, reminding Aliyah to remain patient and keep her faith in humanity, even though the world often disappoints. But they remained firm in their principle: this wasn't just about building a hospital, but about building better human beings. On a quiet evening, after almost a year of hard work, Aliyah and Amir sat together on the porch of their home, gazing at the star-filled sky. Aliyah began to speak, her soft voice full of doubt. "Amir, are we making the right choice? With everything happening, with all these challenges, sometimes I feel like this world is too harsh and uncaring." Amir looked at her gently. "Aliyah," he replied with confidence, "every feeling you have is a test of our faith. Do you remember the verse we read together back then, about those who struggle in the path of Allah? They too felt alone and betrayed, but they kept going because they knew their purpose was greater than themselves." Aliyah paused for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I know," she said, "but sometimes I feel scared. Scared of losing again." Amir held her hand tightly. "We never truly lose, Aliyah. Every time we do good, every time we share, we gain something greater than what we ever imagined." Their global hospital project finally began to take shape. The medical research center they established became not only a home for doctors and scientists but also a place for spiritual teaching and learning, where humanitarian and divine values were honored and prioritized. Their success in building a hospital that provided the best medical services free of charge to those in need, especially in developing countries, inspired many people. However, more than just a physical building, the hospital became a symbol of the great change that can be achieved when faith and love work together. Aliyah and Amir taught the world that true success is not measured by wealth or influence, but by how many lives they have helped and how many souls they have touched. As time passed, Aliyah and Amir became role models for many. They were not only known as a successful husband and wife team in humanitarian work but also as examples of how to live simply, uphold religious principles, and remain true to a higher purpose in life. One day, when Aliyah felt tired after managing some foundation activities, she sat with Amir and said, "Amir, I feel we've lived a meaningful life. But I also feel that this world still needs more love, more kindness. We must keep fighting." Amir looked at her with love. "We will not stop, Aliyah. As long as we can help one person, give hope to one soul, this struggle will never stop." Aliyah and Amir, though older now, remained active in managing their humanitarian centers. Their mission wasn't just limited to hospitals or foundations but also touched everyone they met. They taught that guidance is a never-ending journey, and that every act of goodness creates more light. Until the end of their lives, Aliyah and Amir left behind not only a material legacy but also a spiritual legacy that would continue to inspire future generations to seek peace and goodness in this world, through faith and love. Years passed. The educational centers and hospitals built by Aliyah and Amir now stood firm in many places. Generation after generation grew under the values they had planted. They no longer needed to be physically present, their legacy lived on in the hands of those they once helped. Aliyah began to fall ill. Her illness came silently, slowly, and inevitably. The doctors who admired her did everything they could. But Aliyah was already at peace. She knew her time was drawing near. One morning, Amir found her sitting by the window of their room, gazing at the sunlight streaming through the white curtains. "I want us to go home, Amir," she said softly. "We are home, Aliyah," Amir replied, his voice trembling. "This place is home." Aliyah turned to him, smiled, and looked into his eyes. "Not that home," she whispered. "The Eternal One." On a quiet Friday night, Aliyah asked Amir to recite Surah Maryam. She lay peacefully, holding the old wooden prayer beads Amir had given her on the day she first became a Muslim. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Aliyah closed her eyes in peace. In sacred silence, she returned to her Lord with the name of Allah on her lips, and faith glowing in her chest. Aliyah's passing shook people all over the world. Thousands of messages came from orphans, patients, Qur'an memorizers, and people of many backgrounds, religions, and nations. Amir stood at his wife's grave, hands trembling, reciting the words they had always said together. "Indeed, we belong to Allah, and indeed, to Him we shall return." Months later, Amir, who had kept smiling despite his broken heart, began showing signs of fatigue. He fell ill in the small room where he taught children the Qur'an. Like Aliyah, he passed away with a smile, in a state of purity, after completing the final rak'ah of his duha prayer. They were buried side by side, behind the education center they had built. Upon two simple wooden gravestones was written, "Aliyah and Amir, two souls who lived to give, died to return, and will rise together in light." Many years passed, but their story never faded. The orphans they once nurtured had become leaders, doctors, educators, and guardians of goodness. One of them wrote a book titled, "Two Lights from Humble Soil," telling the story of a couple who changed the world not with power, but with love, knowledge, and faith. Every year, thousands gathered to commemorate the day Aliyah and Amir passed away. But they were never worshipped, never excessively glorified. They were simply remembered as two servants who chose the hard path for the sake of truth. Because people like Aliyah and Amir never truly die, they live on in ongoing charity, in beneficial knowledge, in the prayers of the children they helped, and in every act of goodness sparked by their lives. And in the final prayers of every student they taught, one plea was always heard. "O Allah, illuminate their graves, place them among those you love. Let their story be a reminder for us who are still walking this path."